All right. So interestingly, we are 5 minutes past 7 my time. So at least 5 minutes past the time we were supposed to start. No one's there yet, which has never happened before. Only the very first time I did this, actually. That's funny. I want to tap into that story for a moment. So I remember that the first time I created this collective coaching group, I this was in February this year, February 2024, and I remember talking to Conrad, great friend of mine, great coach, great hypnotherapist. Give him any label, he's great at it. And he loved the idea of me starting this. He thought it was amazing. And I think I don't remember how many people we had in the group. I think there were like four, maybe the very first week that I wanted to do this. And I hosted the call, and I really looked forward to it. But I was so nervous. I was so afraid. I was like, are people going to like it? Am I going to be able to do this? Like, do people even want to do this? Like, how does this even go? Like, how do I lead a group of people to do this? Right? It's such an interesting thing, and there's so many questions. And really, still, I mean, I'm always going to be in the middle of my coaching journey, but at the time, for real, I can look back now with a different view on who I was, right? And therefore, it's very easy for me to judge myself and be like, oh, I didn't know as much as I know right now, and therefore I had trouble with it. But at the time, I knew quite a lot as well. I don't want to downplay myself. And so yeah, no, I planned the call, and I showed up, and nobody was there. There was no one there, and I was like, fuck, like, I guess no one wants to do this. I guess I can't help anyone with this. Like, never mind. So I remember calling Conrad. We had to talk about it, and I was like, yeah, you know what? It doesn't work. Never mind. I don't want to do this. Like, people don't want this. I don't want this. And he's like, well, why did you start it? And I told him because I still think it's a great idea, and I really want to influence this coaching world and help people, help everyone, basically. Every coach to become a better coach, and not according to the rules of what coaching is, but according to their personal philosophy and who they are, and to just confidently step into the coach that they are, not the coach that they're trying to be or that they're made. And the best way to learn coaching is through coaching. And it can be difficult to start. And so I get it. And therefore I decided to start this group, to help people to become better at coaching, become better at being themselves when they're coaching, because that's a better way of wording it, to become extraordinary coaches. And so this collective coaching group really is that, with that intention. But that's not the point of this story, because I was sharing this why with so much passion, and really was like, this is what I want to do. I realized that I am doing this group mostly for me as well. It might sound selfish, but I'm not doing it as much for you guys as I'm doing it for myself. I'm probably doing it a little bit more for myself, and this is also part of my philosophy in the way I look at life. I think that everyone ultimately is in a way selfish, and I think this is Buddhist saying where they say that doing a good deed for another is the best way to be selfish. And why? Because it makes us feel good, and we help somebody else with that too. And I love that, and I do believe in that principle. I believe that every action that we take is an attempt to improve our own state. It's how we're wired. We're wired for survival, but I'm wired for my survival, and you're wired for your survival. That's how we're wired, and that's really on like an evolutionary perspective. And now that we've grown and got to this point of 2024, we get to mix that with a sense of compassion. And so this selfish thing of me creating this group is very selfish because I love it so much, but also because I get to help other people with it. And so that day with Conrad, during that conversation, I was like, yes, I am doing it for me. And now how can I create this in a way where, regardless if anyone likes it, I will still show up? How can I do that? And I got some clarity on it, and I made the decision, regardless of whether anyone wants to be a part of this group, I know that I'm going to be, I'm going to show up. I'm going to be there consistently. Whether people show up or not, I'm going to be there. And right now I'm here, and I have fun. It's exciting for me. It's exciting to talk about this. I get to explore a different topic that I ordinarily wouldn't have been talking about. And so that really became my philosophy too, is the things I do, I always do for me. And regardless of if anyone else likes it or shows up or wants to be part of it, that's not why I do it. It'd be great. Everyone is welcome to join in, but I'm going to do it anyway. And I know a lot of stories of really great coaches and all of this who created retreats and things like that, where they had this fear of, hey, what if no one shows up? And then I get to ask them the question, like, hey, would you still do it yourself? Let's say no one showed up. Would you still be able to have fun with yourself? They'd be like, yeah. And I remember this person sharing how she hosted a retreat and no one showed up, and she had like the best week in Bali all by herself, meditating, doing everything that she would have done with other people, but now she got to do it just by herself, and she loved it. And I was like, isn't that awesome? And for the next retreat that she did, a ton of people showed up. And that's really what this is about for me. It's really about, hey, I decided to dedicate this time from 7 p.m. until 8 p.m. on my Sunday to guide coaches to become better at being themselves in a coaching session. And that's what I'm doing right now in a different way by talking about this story. And I very much encourage you to do things for you and ask yourself, would I still do this if nobody liked it? If nobody would have joined me in this, would I still be doing this? And if the answer is no, then stop doing it because you're pleasing. That's just my take. Another funny story. I recently decided that I wanted to stop saying that. I say it a lot, where I'm like, well, but that's just my perspective, as if it's not valuable, as if it's not one of the greatest perspectives in the world, right? Because it's mine. So I've been really journaling on that and doing some coaching on owning my stuff more. And what I've realized is that you don't just change behavior like that. Sometimes you can, but most often it starts with getting out of the habit of doing it. And what most people think of getting out of the habit is that it means to stop doing it, when that's not the case. Getting out of the habit is becoming conscious of the habit. The moment that you're conscious of the habit, it's not a habit anymore. And so for me to catch myself, or for me to expand upon the self-confidence that I'm feeling, doesn't mean I never say, but that's just my perspective anymore. It means that I get to say it and become conscious of the fact that I say it, and then make a different decision because of this consciousness, up to a point where maybe in a few days, weeks, months, years from now, or maybe never, I won't have to say it anymore, and I'll just own my own perspective. And so give yourself some slack. If you're trying to quit a habit, the very first step is to become aware of it. And the moment that you're aware of what you're doing, it's not a habit anymore. The moment where you, let's say smoking, it's always the greatest example when it comes to addiction and habit. Let's say you light up a cigarette and you just do that. And then when you're smoking, you're like, oh shit, I'm smoking again. Well, whatever. If you want to quit that habit, it's not about not smoking anymore. It's about the conscious decision. It's about getting the conscious decision before you light the cigarette. The moment that you hold the fire and you have the cigarette, and then you realize, hey, I'm going to light up a cigarette right now, it's not a habit anymore. It becomes a conscious decision. At that moment, you get to be like, that's not who I want to be. Or you get to be like, okay. And then it's a conscious decision. So that's just my perspective. No, I'm kidding. I didn't want to say it. I thought it was funny. So what I then decided to talk about, and then I went into like 5 stories to is the anatomy of coaching. I've talked about it before a few times, and I actually wrote a book about it. That's funny how I said it like that. I'm in the process of writing a book about it. I have like 7 pages, but that's valuable. So these 5 stages of a coaching session, I have talked to them about them before, and I have never been a fan of putting coaching sessions in boxes. I've never been a fan of doing things alongside a certain formula. I've never been a fan of this rigidity around it, right? This is how you have to do it. If you don't do it, then it doesn't work. However, I realized that some coaching sessions are life-changing and others aren't. And I got curious to know, why is that? What makes it so? Because I can have a conversation with one person and it's life-changing, and can I have another conversation with another person and it's not. when I'm still the same person? And so I decided to analyze hours of coaching conversations from others and from myself to sort of figure out, what is it that makes an effective coaching session great? What is it that makes an extraordinary coaching session so extraordinary? What happens? What's going on? And sort of from a inside out perspective instead of an outside in. Instead of making a formula and then coaching accordingly, I looked at great coaching sessions and made a formula out of that. And so what I've come up with is these 5 C's, which go as follows: comfort/connect, clarity, change, challenge, and completion. And those are the 5 stages that any extraordinary coaching session passes through. And now, I'm not saying that this is how you have to coach, because I am very much challenging you not to and inviting you not to, and to see what happens. This is just a great way to observe yourself and allow yourself to be more of yourself when you're coaching. Because this is not about what questions you ask. It's not about how you talk to your client. It's not about what you do with them or which exercise you go through or any of that. This is very much about realizing where you're at during the conversation. And when you know in what stage you are, you get to be yourself within that stage. You get to fill in what that stage looks like for you. However, it's just the stage that sort of makes sure that whatever you do within that stage doesn't matter. As long as you go through the stage, the session is going to be valuable. And so I want to quickly touch upon all of them. And to start off, it's the comfort/connect stage. This is where you first meet your client. It's this can be done with an existing client or with a new client, where you just talk about the weather. You bond a little bit. You talk about like little superficial stuff, like where they're calling from or how they're doing, or you can ask how their week's been and not let them go into complete detail, but like all these things. You can maybe give them a compliment or anything, but it's not yet a time to be. I mean, it is the earlier you can get to vulnerability, that's always great, but it's not so much about really sharing all your problems and throwing everything on the table yet. This is really for you to sort of set the stage. You can even meditate in this. This is why some coaching teachers tell you to start your coaching sessions off with a meditation, because you get to connect with your client, with your coachee. Now, any of these stages, I want to add that any of these stages aren't in this exact. Okay, they are in this order for a reason. However, it doesn't mean that once you've gone through one stage, it's gone. The moment that you step into a stage, you stay in that stage for the whole conversation. So this connection, this building comfort, is something that is a constant throughout the session. However, most people start off there. The moment where you start to build comfort later, or you skip this stage, is when the session can't go as deep as it usually can, because you're not on the same page as your client, because they don't feel safe to open up yet. Then the next stage that you enter is the clarity stage. This one is very much about what are we going to talk about? Why are we here? Questions like, what would make this a successful coaching conversation for you? Or what do you hope to walk away with after this coaching conversation? These are great clarity questions. It's very much for you to figure out, what are we doing here? What does the person in front of me want? And I've once said this thing where I was wondering what makes a coaching session successful, and then I thought, well, when the client gets what they want. That was my answer. And then I realized that that's not completely true, because sometimes our clients think they want things, and then we actually have to give them what they need. And so then I was thinking, okay, then the answer to the question is, a coaching session is successful when the client gets what they need. And then I was like, maybe, but then what do they need? And I started listing all these things, like, oh, they need this and they need that. And then I was like, what the fuck? I don't know that. I think I know that. I think I know what they need, but I don't. I got no clue. They know. And so that made me realize, maybe a successful coaching conversation is about me drawing out of the client what it is that they truly want, so that I can empower them and allow them to get what they need in order for them to get that which they say they want. And I like that definition a little bit more. And this clarity stage is very much about drawing out of your client what it is that they want, what it is that they need, and possibly all stages that they have to pass through in order for them to get that. This stage is very much about you asking questions. It's very much about you summarizing, like things like, all right, I hear you say this. Does that mean you'd like to talk about this? Or does that mean that, or let's say we were to dive deeper into this, would that make this into a successful coaching conversation? Or would you like your intention and focus for the session to be this? Or, hey, I hear you say this. All of those things, right? Where you're very, very conscious about, you and your client. It's also very much about why are you talking about that, what you're talking about. Like, what are you doing? Clarity stage for me is very much like that. There's no small talk. There's no bullshit. We're cutting to the chase. It's like, I want clarity. And this stage also continues throughout the whole coaching conversation. The moment where you're stepping into the other stages, you always want to go back on clarity. It's really important that you as a coach don't put your mind into the client's mind. Like, they might tell you they want certain things, and we automatically start creating conclusions out of that, and we sort of start assuming all these things. And we often, when we assume that we understand what they're saying, it's very much a reminder for us to check in with them and be like, hey, I'm noticing myself assuming that this is what you're this is what you're wanting or saying or whatever. Am I right? And most often people will correct you. They're like, yeah, and, or no, but, and that's so helpful, because you don't want to put your own thoughts and beliefs on them. You want to make, like, turn yourself off if you can with all your beliefs and all of your thoughts. And that's very much what this clarity stage is about. And that's what you want to come back to throughout the whole coaching conversation. Now, what happens if you skip this clarity stage is that the session's not going anywhere. It will remain this sort of, yeah, we're just talking. It will remain sort of a conversation. You can have that conversation with your friend. What happens if you stay in clarity for too long is that it will still be sort of a helpful session, but actually all that's happening is you sort of, it will be more of an interview. And that can be helpful to people in a way, because they get to learn things about themselves, but there's no practicality to it. And that's why I think it's important to step into the clarity stage, but also step out of it in terms of not have it be the main focus anymore, and shift into the change state. And this change state is sort of, that phase is very much related to the challenge phase. Those two are sort of together. They're kind of linked together, but sometimes it's change, sometimes it's challenge, sometimes it's both. And this change state is very much about thinking further, taking the clarity a step further. For example, suggesting an answer and then going back to clarity, suggesting wrong things, like really tapping into what, like, challenging, really, it's not, because it's not challenge. It's very much about changing, inviting change right now. And this can be through exercises, through telling them things to do, or through having them look at their clarity from a different perspective, where it's like, hey, sort of changing the way they think through different suggestions and all of this. Now, that's very interlinked to the challenge part, where you're going to question the answers that were given. You're going to very questioning the problem, questioning the outcome of all of that. Questions like, so where's the gift in that when somebody shares a problem with you? Or are you sure that's, like, what makes you know that for sure? What makes you know that for sure? How are you sure about that? It's a very challenging question. During this challenge stage, you're allowed to interrupt people. You're allowed to be like, hey, let's shift back to what you just said right there, because I think that's interesting. And really prepare yourself to be wrong here. And I love this part. It's such I'm very good at this. I'm very good at this because I love pointing out in people the things that they can't accept about themselves. And you can find those things in the way they talk and all of this. And then we get to challenge them here. It's like, hey, I noticed that you did that. Did you do that on purpose? And that's a more clarifying question. And then when they give you an answer, you get to challenge that answer. It's also very much about. I mean, I've told my clients, like, stop lying to me. You're not being truthful to me. Hey, I don't want to have this conversation with you. We don't have to. Like, if sorry, I didn't say that, but like, I've said, like, hey, if you don't want to have this conversation right now, we don't have to. You can go. You're free to go. Or like things like, what are you doing here? What? And these are very challenging ways. And so you want to make sure that you have gone through this comfort and connect stage before you start challenging people. You want to make sure that you've gone through this clarity thing before you start challenging people, because it might come across as rude and all of this. Now, this change state, some people just go into the change, other people go into challenge. And for me personally, I prefer challenge. It's sort of my tough love kind of way of doing things. And I believe, and this was interesting, I'm going to look something up because I had a very interesting conversation with another coach. And that was this Monday, I believe, or the Monday after. Let me check. Right. So we made this distinction between a supportive coach and a challenging coach. And I feel like the change part is more of a supportive energy to it. It's very much a, hey, I'm sure that you can do this. Like, what is it that you need in order for you to excel in this? All of that, very much an uplifting, supportive, which is great. And on the other hand, we have the challenging part where it's like, and this is so much more me, and this is really more the way I coach, where I could really tell someone like, well, this is not, you're not going to succeed in this because I can see that you don't believe that you're going to succeed in this. And that's such a more challenging way. Like, that really puts people on the spot. And some coaches have a more tendency to be supportive, others have a more tendency to be challenging. And for me, it's really the challenging part. And others are really great at enforcing change through the supportive. So I wanted to draw that distinction. The the challenge here when you stay too long in these phases is that the session will become, it's great and you can do that, and you will create change, but it might not be lasting change, right? You want to move on to the last phase, the challenge that comes with not getting into this change and challenge part, which is, I see a lot of starting coaches do this because they're afraid to bring about change or to challenge the client, is that it will sort of become a nice interview. People walk away with clarity instead of change. And that's awesome. But I really, really, really suggest any starting coach to really dare themselves to go into this challenge part, go into this change part, and tell your clients to literally change. If in the clarity stage you establish that they feel like they need to clean their room for them to be able to step into that better version of themselves, tell them, hey, you know what we're going to do right now? I'm going to hang up, and within 20 minutes, you're going to call me back, and then you've cleaned your room. That's the change state. That's awesome. This is great. I know a coach, and I have personally done this, actually. I'm still going to share it from the perspective of the other coach. I know a coach who was on a conversation with a client who told her that she wanted to break up, she wanted to break up with her boyfriend. No, it was a he. He wanted to break up with his wife. And they had all this clarity talk about it. And then at some point, the coach had said, go do it. We're going to hang up right now. You're going to call your wife, and then you're going to call me back. And he did. He called him back. He broke up with his wife. It felt super relieving to him. He wouldn't have done it if he hadn't had that final push, but that was really the best decision that he could make at that moment. And those are really those change things. Like, that's what makes great coaching great coaching. They could have stopped with the realization that, I want to break up with my wife. Like, that would have been a very interesting coaching conversation, because he got that clarity. He would walk away with the clarity of, like, right, I know right now I'm in a conversation, in a relationship I don't want to be in. However, what made that coaching conversation even more powerful is the fact that he walked away even out of the relationship too. He really made a change to his life that's going to propel way into the future, and everything that's going to happen from now is going to be different because of that one coaching conversation. Now, I don't want to. Hmm, I feel like warning you, people, to not do those types of things. Like, you can't just like s- feel into it, right? Use your intuition. You know that when you're on a coaching conversation with someone and they're complaining about their partner to you, please use your, and I know I actually don't even need to say this. Just don't, like, you, I'm not going into this. This is your responsibility. Nope, not me. And then the last part is the completion phase. This is where you summarize the session. This is where you ask your client, hey, what did you get out of the session? What did you find most valuable? What made this session so valuable to you? What are the action steps that you're going to implement in your life now that you've changed, or because of the session? All of these things. And this stage is important to make the change and the challenge and all of that you've established through the session, to make it last, to make sure that people don't fall out of it, that they don't drop out of it. It's amazing. I know great coaches who can really give people this feeling of ecstasy and this motivation, this inspiration, and that will happen. Like, this will last from Tuesday to Wednesday, and then all the other days of the week, they're out of it. They're back into their old self. And so this last part of the coaching conversation is very much about making sure that that doesn't happen. Now, those are the 5 stages, and these are important to me. And I think this is a great way to analyze your own coaching. I'm not saying implement this. This is how every session should look like. It's more of a, whenever the coaching conversation wasn't as extraordinary as it can be and could have potentially been, that's probably because somewhere within these 5 things, you didn't fully get out of it what you could have gotten out of it. Maybe you skipped a stage, maybe you skipped half the stage, maybe you went through a stage too fast. All of these things, and I can't tell you what that is. You really got to feel this for yourself, and you'll know what kind of person you are. I'm very like, I don't need to spend a lot of time in connect and comfort. I don't need to. Sometimes I even just start like, hey, what can I do for you today? What do you want to get out of this conversation today? Really just getting into it, because why not? It's really my personality. However, I know other coaches who are really great at stepping into this session and for 15 minutes really talking about football and the weather, and then suddenly make this sort of amazing shift where they draw everything back from what's been said in that connect stage to even have the clarity and change shape be even better. That's possible. That's just not me. Something I feel like adding there, and I forgot. Hold on. Never mind. No, remember. Okay. So yeah, those are those 5 stages, and I think they're awesome. And it's very much about, yeah, finding your way here. Use these stages to sort of stick to something, to see it as like the borders, and you get to color it all in. You get to do whatever you want to do with it, but these borders might help. And please go out of the borders if you feel like it, but then do it consciously, and that will prevent you from making mistakes without realizing what you're doing wrong, in essence. So yeah, I think that's great. Okay, was there anything that I wanted to add to this? Because I don't. I was like, if I'm going to keep on talking, I'm going to make this so valuable. This it's going to be too valuable, and you're just getting it for free, um, which I love. I think it's awesome that you guys are part of this group, and I'll probably put this on YouTube too, because it's really valuable. Mm. And I love talking about this. I could really talk about this for a very long time. And there might be, yeah, if you want, let me know. I can zoom in on any of these stages a little bit more. I'm still working on the book, and it's going to come. So, because there's combinations of them too, right? The moment where you combine comfort plus change plus challenge, you really this will be more of storytelling. This is like you sharing your own experience of what happened with you, and then what you did relating to what they're doing. Um, you can challenge and clarity are often combined as well. For example, in questions like, I'm curious why that's not working for you. Questions like that. Like it's a very challenging question, and at the same time, it will bring clarity. So yeah. Just reading through the notes. I know it's a book that is going to be made. Yeah, some things that I just want to include in there. Things like how I think some people should stop trying to coach, right? Stop trying to solve problems. Right. That's sort of what I wanted to say, where sometimes we we go into this coaching conversation, and we go into the whole small talk. We go into the comfort stage, the connect stage, and then from there, some coaches find something that someone says, and they make the whole session about that thing, which people said in the comfort stage. And for example, um, you might ask someone like, "Hey, how was your weekend?" And they're like, "Yeah, I had this debate. Like, it was great, but there's still something on my mind about like the conversation I had with my partner, and it didn't really go well." And then most coaches would be like, "Nice, we've got a problem. Let's zoom into this." And it's great. And 6 out of 10 times, you're probably right to do that. And if you were to ask them what they want to talk about in that session, that will probably be that thing that they already mentioned. However, I do think it's so important to not assume what the coachee wants the session to be about by what they're saying in the connect and comfort stage. Please ask them again, or please ask them like, "Hey," because I've done this, and the moment I started to do this, I was actually surprised, because I started to do it as sort of a pleasing behavior. I was like, I just want to make sure we're on the same page. Where I would ask someone like, "Hey, I hear you say this. Is that something that you want the session to be about?" And the first time I did that, when I was like, the answer is going to be yes anyway, just asking so they like me more. Right? The answer was like, no, no, actually, no, I have this other thing. I was like, oh, interesting, because usually I would have made the session about that. And it can be very people won't say it, right? Because they appreciate your effort. Most people won't say it. I think there's 10% of people who would, but most people wouldn't say it. They would have you lead, because you are in this leadership position, you're in this leadership role. And so they're like, oh well, probably he knows best. Like, oh, okay, well, I guess that's what I wanted to talk about then today. When no, it's our job to ask the client. Like, we work for them, right? We work for them by sort of sometimes working against them and telling them the things they don't want to hear. But I do think it's very important to ask the client, like, hey, what would you like to focus on during this session, instead of just focusing on what we assume that they want to focus on. Please be clear about that. And sometimes when, let's say, you hear someone talk about how they had that bad weekend because of their partner, and then you're like, hey, is that what you want to talk about in the coaching sessions as well? And they're like, no, not really. I kind of have this other thing. Challenge that. Of course, be happy to challenge that. Be like, oh, that's interesting. It sounds to me that you want to talk about that other thing when this is weighing way more heavily on you. Are you possibly avoiding this? These things are like, the moment that you get to be conscious of all of this, your sessions are going to be mind-blowing. People are going to be like, did you read my mind? Like, how do you know that? When it's just, you're just willing to challenge, and they'll forget about the question. Like, if you're not right, they'll forget about the question anyway. Let's say you ask this, like, it sounds to me that you might be avoiding talking about that. If that's not the case, they'll be like, no. And then you're like, okay. And it's fine. So this is really a great way to challenge people and to sort of poke that when you're right, you'll probably trigger them. And that's why it's very important to establish this comfort and connection phase before you start poking, because people will literally hang up on you. And this has happened to me. I've seen it happen with other people, where this challenging thing is great if understood well and if practiced. However, coaching is it fucks with people's minds. It really fucks with people's minds, and that's what makes it great. But that's also what, with great power comes with great responsibility. And when we hold that power as a coach to really step on people's toes, it's basically, and I joke about this, but people basically pay me to tell them the things they don't want to hear. And I can do that because I do it in a way where suddenly they do want to hear it, right? They want to hear the things they don't want to hear. And if you don't do it in the right way, you're going to be, to them, seen as rude. You're going to be seen as all of these things. They're going to call you names, all of that. So you don't want that to happen. And so you want to go about this process as consciously as you possibly can. So that's a part of it. Just checking the document, not to see if I missed anything. I'm reading through stuff and I'm like, I could make so many separate videos on this. Like, why would I put this all in one video and make it so great? Because it's like all you need to know to like start coaching. You know what? I'm going to do it anyway. There's this other thing, and this is really my coaching philosophy, is that the results and the answers aren't within me. They don't come from me. They come from the person in front of me. And it's actually cool. I created a post on this. I'm going to read this post because I think it was a great post. We're gonna have to go pretty far in my LinkedIn and somewhere on my LinkedIn. If you're not following my LinkedIn, I think you should. You're gonna like what you find. Right now, I'm posting a lot about fulfilling all of our own needs, authenticity, self-confidence, self-expression, just getting closer to who you are as a person, finding your own boundaries, setting boundaries, people pleasing. Here it is. So yeah, this was a perfect coaching conversation. This was so awesome to be able to do this. Because I coached a dad on parenting, and I'm not a dad. I don't have kids. And so it's like, how can I do that? Right? How can I give people solutions to problems I've never faced myself? Because that's what most that's what most coaches would say, and most people too. It's like, oh, but you don't really have life experience, so how can you help people? And I always say, well, because the people I talk to do have life experience, and I use theirs. And that's what it is. That's really what coaching is. It's not about what I've achieved in my life. It's not about what I've done. Sure, the more I've experienced, the better I get to emphasize and relate to their experience, but that's got nothing to do with it. All that will change is that they'll like me more, and so they'll be willing to go deeper. That's it. That's all. And sometimes personal stories can create change and challenge. However, it doesn't matter. Great coaching doesn't require storytelling. Let me share the conversation with you. So my client goes, my daughter is having a hard time understanding me. She feels like I'm too busy all the time and thinks that I should spend more time with her. He explained all of that. And I say, do you agree? And he says, well, yes, but money has to come in. Like I have to work. And I asked, well, did you have a conversation about that with her? Just because I was curious and I wanted to clarify. And he's like, with her, and I nod, and he's like, I don't think she will understand me. Yeah, that's what he said. And so I was silent. I didn't say anything. And then I see him think, and I ask, are you sure? Because I saw him think. And he says, well, no, maybe I could include her more in what I do, in the work I do. And then he lights up and he's like, I think she will love that. And I was silent, and he just lit up from excitement. And he was, that's what I'm like, this is what I've not been seeing. This is what I've been missing. I should include my daughter more in what I'm doing and my plans, and like involve her with what I'm doing. And I said like two things. I said two things. That's all. And I didn't give him any advice. And this was, I can say life-changing for him, because it changed the relationship he had with his daughter, simply because I was there to listen and reminded him of his own power. He had all the answers. He had everything. What I could have done, and what some starting coaches might have done, is when that person shares hey, my daughter's having a hard time understanding me. She feels like I'm too busy all the time and thinks I should spend more time with her. They'd be like, oh, have you tried this and that? And like, oh yeah, I've had the same thing with my daughter, don't worry about it. When that's not what people want. You're not helping someone in that way. It's very much about drawing out of them what's in there and how they would change the situation. It's got nothing to do with you and your experience. You're a different person. You have a different daughter. It's not related. So I love this example um, how I believe that everyone already knows best what to do for themselves, and all I'm here to do is to remind them of that fact. My only job is to bring out their greatness. It's not to be the greatness in their life. It's them. They already have all the answers. They know perfectly well what to do. And my job is to help them remember that. And your job is to do that too, right? If you're a coach, by being yourself, by using my 5C model or whatever. So yeah, I hope that was helpful. I'm very happy I showed up today. I got to share a lot of my value. And I like it. I like it. I'm very grateful. Thank you very much for watching this, if you have. And I look forward to seeing everyone in the collective coaching group. If you're watching this, you're not part of the collective coaching group yet, because I might publish this on YouTube too. There's a link in the bio that you can subscribe to the collective coaching group, where we come together every other week to coach, be coached, and to watch other people coach in order for us to become better at coaching. Because the only way we can become better through coaching is through coaching. So I'm inspiring everyone to coach and to learn from each other and all of this. So it's free. You can just join. I'd be happy to have you. And if you guys have any questions about all of this, then let me know. I'd be happy to dive into topics deeper. I'd be happy to do another one of these, possibly like in a webinar shape, or do it live one day so people can ask live questions. Let me know. And yeah, I look forward to seeing you all next time. Cheers.